so we have to get our power wire through the firewall. So I happen to have this front piece out already because I was working on my my downpipe, but if you need to remove, there's a battery cover with a couple bolts on it, and then there's a front piece with a bunch of, it's a 5mm Allen quarter turn connectors. And this whole piece lifts off. And the wipers obviously need to come off too, they're 14s. But you can see the grommets right there. It's plastic that's covered in rubber. So I used just a little drill with a one of these on like a 1/4 inch super long extension like this. And I was able to just drill a little tiny hole there. You can see it in the top corner. And I'm going to use that for my power wire. So I pushed my 4 gauge through the hole. And then on the inside of the car, this side of the dash just unsnaps. Just like this, unsnaps out. And then you can find that grommet right there. And the key is to make sure that you're, when you're drilling it, you need to be clear of the grommet. You need to be clear of that harness inside. Like watch both sides. Take a look periodically, and we can pull our power wire through like that. Okay, so we've got our power wire through the firewall. So now we need to start taking the car apart. So let's talk about an amplifier and kind of what an amplifier needs to function properly. Specifically, we're doing a subwoofer amplifier, not a speaker amplifier. So we've got an amp here, and the amp has a couple different connections on it. There is power in from the battery. There is ground in, which would be, the negative battery terminal or a grounding point on the car. There is the speaker output, which is going to connect directly to the subwoofer. And then there are the input RCAs, and there's some output RCAs, which we're not going to be using. There's also remote bass control. So in this case, what I need is power, ground. I'm not going to use remote because this amplifier that I have here actually does something called signal sensing, where it can sense whether or not there is sound playing through the wires and turn itself on and off automatically. So I won't need anything for remote, but then for the input side of this, I'm going to need to find a place that I can tap into the factory stereo to pull sound. Now if I had an aftermarket stereo, oftentimes they'll give you RCA connectors and you can just use a cable to plug them in. Something like this work just fine for that. In my case, I'm going to be using RCA pigtails, like these ones that are, I think these are JL Audios, but they basically give you like a piece of speaker wire that you can tap into an existing speaker, and then they give you an RCA connector that you can plug in here, and this amplifier will accept that signal. So I've got my power, we know where that's coming from. I'm not concerned with remote. I need to find a grounding point, and I need to find a place where I can find a speaker signal. One other thing that I do like to do when I install an amplifier like this, I don't have a bass knob for this amplifier. There's a plug here you can see for remote bass control. I do not have a bass knob for this amplifier, although Alpine makes one. I might add it in the future though. And running the cable takes a lot of time and effort. Depending on where the amplifier ends up, it could be, fairly time consuming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run some network cable inside the car from where the amplifier is up to near the front of the vehicle. Okay, so I picked up some Cat 5e. It's gray. Normally I like to use black, but that was what Lowe's had, and that's where I happen to be. So Cat 5e, and from Alpine or JL or whoever's amplifier you're using, if you have this style connector on there, that connector is called an RJ11, and that connector contains 6 conductors. So you can see here's RJ11 connectors, that contains 6 conductors, and you can make your own cable. It's pretty easy to do at any length that you want. So I generally like to do that. That makes it easy to remove later on, or I don't even have to care about removing the cable. And also I can run the cable now without even having the knob, which I think I'm going to end up adding a knob. This amplifier was in my Volkswagen Golf R, which had a factory sub, so I could use the factory subwoofer control to change the volume of the subwoofer. The Mini does not have a factory sub that's controllable by volume, so therefore, you know, I can't really have any sort of adjustment. So we are going to start taking the car apart, and I'll try to show my progress here and there along the way. So to begin, I'm going to take out this, and then I'm going to start on the disassembly of the back. Alright, I'm pretty far into the disassembly, so I wanted to kind of go over some things. So this plastic piece here you pull up on, it is very firm, you have to pull it. The clips will remain behind. This is what they look like, and you can get a standard, like a panel tool in behind them and pull them out. The actual cover snaps into this space here. The seat bottom pulls up from the front and lifts forward. It just comes right out. This has snaps, so there's a snap all the way up the side. And I obviously don't have this quite out yet. The seat back is actually interesting. So there's a cap here with a cover on it, and this cover has a snap in the back and kind of a thing that squeezes in the front, so you kind of have to like pry out the sides and lift it straight up. Once you get that off, there's this metal cap here, and this metal cap is a single 10 mil on it, so you take the 10 mil out and you can see the hinge with the like where the seat sits in the hinge. So you can lift up the seat and pull it out, but on this side it's keyed. So you see that there's like a flat piece there, and it's the same way on the side of the seat. So you kind of have to lift it so that the seat is in like a position kind of like this, and then it will slide out. So got all of that out. We're going to take this side cover off and see what we've got back there. Alright, so these pull off. There's like a clip behind them. This one, same thing, pulls out. There's 2 plastic retainers here and here. They don't need to come out because this is actually slotted behind it. And I took out the bolt down here, which is a T50, which retains the seatbelt. So it looks like now I can remove this panel. It appears to be loose. Alright, so we removed this panel. There was a screw up here right where my finger is, and there was a screw in the back right up here. Beyond that, just snapped right out. This is the factory amplifier. So this sits right here. There's a single 20mm screw on the bottom that holds it in. We pull it off. It says on the back Harman Becker, and there is a harness here. So in theory, what should be happening is there is signal wires coming in from the radio. This is an amplifier that has some sound output happening, and then power and ground, etc. So we're going to find out here which of these wires we want to tap into, and that's going to be where we get our signal for our subwoofer, our new subwoofer system. So this will be our RCA inputs will come from here. Then we're going to have to find a ground somewhere back here. There's a lot of good spaces. You generally want to stay away from things that are existing bolt holes for like seat belts. Even though this looks like a nice beefy bolt, you know, I generally want to stay away from those kinds of things. Anything that has a plastic grommet like this isn't going to be a good one either. If there's a factory grounding point back here for like the amplifier or something, that's generally pretty good. So we'll look around a little bit and we'll find something. Oftentimes we can use like a bolt and a nut through a factory hole like this one that my finger's in right there, as long as it's not going to interfere with the seat, for example. Maybe something like this, brace back here, So anyway, we'll find something. Okay, so I've connected speaker wires to the factory amplifier outputs that feed the, in my car, front door and front woofers. So there are woofers down here, door speakers there. I honestly don't even know if there are woofers in here. I know there's grills for woofers. I'd have to look in there with a flashlight. But in my car, because I don't have the Harman Kardon system, because I have regular, the base level system, there is a blue, red, blue, brown twisted pair here, which is the passenger side woofer. And then there is a black, red / black, brown twisted pair here, which is the driver's side. So I tapped into those, and that gives me my signal to feed my amplifier. So if we look back here where I'm at, I've got my power, I've got my bass knob, I've got my 2 signals for both sides, and I have to figure out now where I'm going to get my ground from and where I'm going to mount my amplifier. And what I'm thinking is that I'm probably going to put my amplifier in this area here, and then I'm going to build maybe a small false floor that goes over the top of it, or something along those lines, because this pocket really isn't incredibly useful anyway. So I'm going to come up with something for that. And I think that I'm going to get my ground right here with a bolt and a nut. Now, one thing when we're talking about routing wires in cars, it's important that you try to avoid pinch points so that you don't end up with wires that are cut or torn in some way. So like, you know, when I'm coming down this side, I'm back behind the carpet, but I'm close to the ground on top of the factory wire harness. When I get here, you see that there's a harness that goes up and a harness that goes down, and I'm coming underneath through that opening where the, you know, this fuel harness and everything else is here, and coming up this way to avoid this possible pinch point. Back here, we need to get to this area where my amplifier is going to be, and my seat's here. So if we look over here, this is going to be a trouble area, and all down here is going to be a trouble area. So what I'm probably going to do is run with the harness up here, and then come down back behind in this area and through the bottom here, where there's really nothing that interacts, and I'm not going to run into any problems. I think that I'm going to get my ground. This is actually a good spot here. So this is a factory ground right here. My finger's touching. So it's just a bolt right there, and it's got a factory ground wires on it. So I'll loosen that up, and that'll be my ground that I use as well. Alright, so here we are. We have the amplifier installed, semi-installed. It's kind of velcroed to the floor right now. So, you know, like I said, we're using power and ground. I did get my ground from this area back here that I suggested, right there on that little stud with the factory brown ground wires. These signals are the 2 that I mentioned on the factory amplifier. Blue with red and black with the red are the 2 positives, and then the blue with the brown and the black with the brown are the 2 negatives. We have our output going to our subwoofer, and I just kind of have it sitting here for now. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to build in terms of amp spacer, or something to go over the top of it, maybe a different sub box, something along those lines, but I at least want to listen to it and see how it sounds and play around with it. This might not be the sub that stays in here. This is a JBL GTO 804 that I've had for a long time. A little 8 like this can do pretty well in a hatch, you know, small car like this. You know, especially if it can be pretty close to a wall like that, it'll get a good reflection and end up kind of with a bass multiplier. So I'm going to play around with it and see how it works. Started to reinstall everything, snap this panel back into place, you know, reinstall the 20 here and the 20 up in the top, and the B-pillar, snap that B-pillar cover back on. I'm going to snap this C-pillar cover back on next. Then I'll go ahead and I'll bolt this back into place like that, where it goes, and then we'll put our seat back in and kind of keep cleaning up as we move forward. This is a good opportunity. There's a lot of crap, you know, like in this area and stuff that you can vacuum out as you're putting things back together. When you have things apart, it's easier to clean the crevices. So just, but we did turn it on and test it, and everything's working. If you do turn it on to test, just make sure that you have everything plugged back in, your factory amplifier and everything, because it is all on the CAN bus system, and the computers can freak out or report issues if something isn't connected. So